So as you know that in this channel, we have been trying to invite different early career researchers who are working on different aspects of the environment uh, and trying to sort of present their research and come up with different ideas that you can find interesting. So for this episode today, we're going into the world of natural resource management, how we can better conserve and use uh, different aspects of our environment uh, to our best benefits. So, as our guest today, we have Patricia Montalvo Rodrigo, my master's cohort at the University of Manitoba, where she worked with sea lamprey and particularly looking into their microbiological aspects. So yeah, I won't go too much into introducing Patricia because I'm not a biologist. So Patricia, I'll let you take over. Why don't you just give like a brief introduction of yourself and what have you been doing? So yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patricia, and I did my master's at University of Manitoba, like Monajit said. My master's was in environment and geography, but I have a microbiology background. So I did my bachelor's degree in microbiology at the University of Puerto Rico, where I'm from. There, I did a lot of research on different extreme environments. So during my undergrad, I did some research on hypersaline hypersaline environments. I looked at archaea there. I did a lot of culturing and isolation. Then I did an internship where I looked at microbes in the bottom of the ocean, and we looked at extracting microbes from uh, seafloor rocks, and that was very interesting. I did that at the Bigelow Lab in Maine. Um, After that, I did some research in marine science as well. I did some oceanography research, some chemical oceanography, and that was kind of what led me to a more ocean based, like being interested in the ocean. Um, but microbiology has always been my main passion. And I guess that background led me to going to Manitoba, where I initially wanted or was interested in Arctic science and doing some research in Arctic microbes. But somehow life moved things around for me, and I ended up working in fish, which is also, I found it was a huge passion of mine. And I found that out after I went on a boat for 2 weeks. I found that just being out there in the ocean and looking at different things and looking at the macrobiology was just as interesting as studying the microbiology. And I ended up doing my master's project in sea lamprey, as Manjit said, and we were looking at the gut microbiome of sea lampreys to try to drive some questions about, um, I guess, environmental conservation and just these are very they're fish that haven't been studied enough. So it's a research gap, and we were trying to somehow fill this research gap with the microbiology side of it.
Right. Yeah. So, Patricia, sorry to cut you off there, but we're going to go more into your research. But I just wanted to add, like, just for our listeners who are like a lot of our listeners are very young, aspiring, like science people. But I'd like to sort of highlight the fact that how uh, you had such diverse experiences. So everything working from your undergrad, you're sort of at it and trying to look into like organisms or different organisms in different environments, and I just feel like that's very critical. Like sometimes we feel like okay, we are just stuck with one thing and we sort of have to stick to it, but it's not like that. Like as you said that you are a microbiologist, but you have been working in the geography field or like sort of like this art science field for a long time, right? So that's sort of is like a testament to how how interdisciplinary science is now, where we collaborate all the time with biologists, with chemists, and sort of that's also like a beauty of it, right? That we can like interact with different people from different different disciplines, right? So yeah, I
Yeah.
just wanted to like restate that.
Adding to that, I think also, well, once you get into university, it seems like you have to already know what you want. I think that's how I felt when I started my undergraduate. And I slowly found that I liked so many things. And as you move forward in your graduate career, and you do a master's or even a PhD, everyone always says that that area of interest just gets smaller and smaller, and you are an expert in one very specific thing. And I think it's so important to have so many different experiences where you can find out what exactly you want to be a specialist on. Because you can like so many things and then end up having a job where you're not as excited. So
Yeah.
I think that was what my goal was, just trying to
Mhm.
find that thing that made me super excited.
Right, exactly. And also like sometimes we are very hard on ourselves, where we try to sort of limit our opportunities. But what I wanted to like the message that I want to give out is that the staying open to opportunities and sort of exploring new things often leads to good things, right? So yeah. So Patricia, moving forward, just going back to your master's research, so yeah, do you want to sort of I know you already talked about your experiences in the boat, but I would like to sort of know more about it. Like what was your what was the moment that sort of like how did you know that fisheries or this aspect of sort of natural resource management was something that you want to pursue?
I think in the area of microbiology, it's sometimes a little bit hard to find how your science impacts the world around you. I think sometimes microbiology is about finding novel things or applying novel techniques or just something so niche that you can't apply to the outside world. And I mean, the way I found this project was it literally landed on my lap. I just asked around, and these were the professors that answered. And when I started getting into it and learning more about it, I realized that it was so important to me that when I go out and talk about my science, I can apply it to other people. And I can um, kind of describe my science in a way that affects others or that others can relate to it. So I think that's what called to me the most about fisheries and just fish ecology is that a lot of people know what fish are and know that they are important to us. So it was so much easier for me to communicate why my science was important. And I guess with that project, I found how essential that is for me to be able to do science that matters and not just science that matters to the lab or to this specific, I don't know, gene or to this specific
Yeah,
microbe. Yeah.
right. Sort of like a what you can think of it like what how I think about is of it is like having like a bird's eye view. Like sometimes we're like focusing too much on maybe the science or the sort of like the nerdy aspects of it, but sometimes it's like being valued of like or like having just understanding that how important your science is to society. So yeah, so moving forward, like tell us a bit more about your research. Like how well like why lampreys or why do you think or you can start off by saying like what lampreys are, because I'm pretty sure a lot of my listeners don't know what like similar to me what lamprey is. But so yeah, if you just want to give a brief introduction of the topic.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about it and then we'll show some slides so you can visually, visualize what a lamprey looks like. So lampreys are eel-like fish. They kind of look like eels, but they're not eels. Sea lampreys are chordates. They are very ancient vertebrates, and they look like eels. They have an eel-like body. So they are very slimy and long and kind of snaky-like. But their biggest difference is that they have a round mouth that has a bunch of teeth, and
We're so excited to see the slide. So yeah.
they are parasitic in their adult life. Sea lampreys are. So there are different types of lamprey, but my project focuses on sea lampreys. They can be found in the coast of the Atlantic, and the kind of sea lampreys that we're looking at are invasive sea lampreys. So they are invasive in the Great Lakes due to a lot of bad decisions that have been made over the years. So the life cycle of sea lampreys is that they start out in uh, fresh water as larvae, and then they travel downstream to the ocean where they become parasitic and they feed on different types of teleost fish, like uh, salmon, lake trout, all of those big fish. So they travel downstream to do that, and then they come up again into the river upstream to lay their eggs and reproduce and then die. Um, and during that life cycle, I think early in the 1800s, when canals were starting to be built and the Erie Canal and all of these big transportation, what is it, waterways? I don't know,
Efforts, yeah. I, yeah, canals, yeah.
canals. They started kind of getting stuck. So they started
Mhm.
traveling more upstream. And once they got stuck, they kind of stayed there. So a lot of sea lampreys now are landlocked. They just do their whole life cycle in the Great Lakes. And this has become an issue because they are top predators. So right now they feed on teleost fish, and since they haven't evolved, like the fish haven't evolved with the sea lampreys, they usually kill their prey. And that has become a huge issue for fisheries in the Great Lakes. And as some people might know, the Great Lakes fisheries are very important for food and eating.
The whole like supply of, yeah, of
Yeah.
protein, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Also for fishermen, that's their job.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
so many areas of um, Great Lakes economy.
Right.
Yeah, I can show you a picture now of sea lampreys. This is what an adult sea lamprey looks like. Up here where it says invasive sea lamprey. This is what a sea lamprey looks like. That's their mouth with a bunch of teeth, and you can kind of see their slimy body. However, when I did my master's project, I was just looking at sea lamprey larvae, which look more like this. So they are smaller and not as scary. They usually don't have their teeth yet. They are
Yeah.
filter feeders, so they don't feed on fish yet either. Um, and they are very cute. So the purpose of my research was looking at these, at the gut of these larval sea lampreys and determining how there could be better ways to do larvae culture, so culturing them in the lab. So there's a lab in Michigan, in the northeast part of Michigan, close to Lake Huron. And there they do all this amazing sea lamprey research, where they look at reproduction, at hormones, pheromones, just anything you can think of for sea lamprey control. So the goal is to reduce the sea lamprey population, so that they are not they're very um, fertile. So they can produce about, I think it's something insane like 100,000 eggs per um,
Oh, that's
incubation.
crazy.
So like a hundred
Yeah.
thousand, something like that. It's something insane.
Right.
Um, and they are trying to reduce the ability of these larvae to succeed and become adults. So they do all these lampricide treatments in the river, where they think, because sea lamprey larvae usually are burrowed in the sediment, so you can't actually see them. Uh,
Mhm.
and they do all these treatments that reach the sediment and they are toxic to the larva. So they can be killed before they start traveling to the ocean to become parasitic.
Mhm.
Um, And part of the issue with all of this is that we don't know everything about these larvae. So we don't know if they're going to evolve to be resistant to this treatment. We don't know if there are better ways to know if they are going to become resistant. We don't know if what we're growing in the lab, like the lamprey that are brought into the lab and kept in the lab, if those are um, the same as the wild ones. So we don't know what is different between being in the lab and not being in the lab. Um, and that was one of the leading or like the main questions that we got for my master's thesis. I wanted to compare the gut microbiome of the larval sea lampreys in the lab and
Mhm.
in the wild to see
Right.
if there were any like big differences.
Differences. Yeah.
Yeah. And we also wanted to maybe draw some assumptions of what the gut microbiome is doing for larval sea lampreys. Usually in fish, the gut microbiome is very important in aquaculture. So it is how you maintain healthy fish, the food that they're
Right.
given, antibiotics, probiotics, all of these things affect the gut microbiome and they ensure that the fish is good enough to go into the market.
Right.
Um, we don't have that goal for sea lamprey, so we don't know what the gut microbiome is doing, and even if it's important, because in some fish it doesn't have to be important.
Mhm.
There's also very little research on filter feeders, and larval sea lampreys are filter feeders. So they feed on detritus and just organic matter that is being broken down.
Mhm.
And we don't really know a lot about what the gut microbiome is doing for filter feeders. So that was another kind of idea that we had in my master's.
Yeah. Just to clarify, so what are you referring to when you're saying feeders?
Yeah, so they feed on the organic matter and the
Mhm.
detritus, like just
Okay.
part, carbon particles that come from, I don't know, if you have like a log that falls in the river and is starting to decompose, that's organic matter and it's
Okay.
falling down in the water column. So
Mhm.
the larval sea lampreys are burrowed in the ground. When all of those particles fall down and lay in the ground, the water, they have like a weird system where there's like a water current that goes through their body and they kind of eat those small particles.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, just to reinstate that, like I just feel like lampreys in general, like since they have this invasive nature, uh some of the it can sometimes be when I first heard you talk about it, sometimes it was hard for me to realize that since it's an invasive species, a lot of the methodology or analysis that you do are very different to how you would do it for a like a non-invasive species, right? Yeah, so it's just like maybe some, because it was an invasive species, a lot of it attention doesn't go into it, but I guess through your research and what's happening in the Michigan laboratory you were talking about, like there's more work into it, and maybe at some point there will be like better management of these species, which is very important, as you said, in terms of like ensuring that well, maybe this problem was caused due to human intervention or like deficiencies in the management, but these scientific driven interventions can actually lead us to a better maybe management issues, right?
Yeah, well, it's also very interesting because, of course, now it might be, well, also coming from the Arctic where
Mhm.
everything has to be conservation based because we are trying to protect the polar bears and protect the beluga whales. And now I'm here talking about killing lampreys. It's a
Mhm.
very polar opposites. But what's interesting about my research is that it doesn't really focus on killing the lampreys. So it can also be applied to, for example, conservation of sea lampreys in their native environments. So
Right.
while they are basically a pest in the Great Lakes, they are also endangered in their native environment. So they are very common in the Iberic Peninsula, so around Spain, Portugal, that area. They're very common there. They are native fish, and they are
Mhm.
trying really hard to conserve them because they are just basically not, they're dying.
Yeah,
This research can also be applied to that.
right.
Different ways at microbiology. So if we find that there are things lacking or that can be
Mm.
supported in the wild, there are different ways that you can make, I guess, a more prolific environment for sea lampreys in their native environment, or just change some things that
Yeah.
can with a microbiome.
Yeah. So yeah, first of all, yeah, thank you for like going into your research. So just wanted to like sort of know from a maybe like a zoomed out perspective, like where was this sample collected, or like where was the sort of like the sample collection done? I know you did a lot of work in the laboratory, but you have like a sort of like a map to show us or something like that.
I love maps.
Yeah.
So here, this is a map of some of the Great Lakes. This is Lake Superior, Lake Huron. This little purple triangle is the experimental station or the biological station where I did most of my dissections and collections and stuff like that. So this is all Michigan, and we did different. We collected different stages of larval sea lampreys. So we had some that were grown in the lab. We had some that were a little bit bigger, a little bit older. We had some that were wild caught. So the ones that we picked up from Okiak River and Trout River, which were very close to the biological station, those were wild caught. So they had spent their whole life in the wild, and they had only fed on just natural water, been in natural water. We also had some samples from Baldwin River, and these samples were collected in the wild and brought into the lab when they were large larvae. So they probably were around 3 or 4 years old, because the larval age is very long. It lasts up to, I think, 7 years. Um, so they, during that stage, they're just eating all of these, they're just feeding until they get really fat, and then they can metamorphosize and turn into bigger lampreys that
Right.
are parasitic.
Yeah.
Um, so we brought these samples from Baldwin River into the lab, and they spent a bunch of time in the lab, and they were exposed to a feeding experiment where they tried different types of food. They usually fed yeast extract. So they had different concentrations of yeast, and just they were trying to look for other questions.
Right.
But we also had some of those samples that we could use. And then we also collected some samples from St. Mary's River and Muniscong River. And these were transformers, which were, after they metamorphosize, they become transformers, which are a little bit bigger, but they are like getting ready to start feeding on fish.
That sounds so cool, Transformers. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Patricia, can you tell us a bit about like sort of the methodologies you used to do this? Like, did this involve like I know it involved a lot of sampling work and also work in the laboratory, but how did the analysis go? Or uh, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so we did a lot of collecting samples and dissections and very fun stuff. And after we did that, the way that microbiological samples are usually analyzed currently, like in modern times, is we do DNA sequencing. So we bring them in the lab and we do some DNA extractions, and then with those DNA sequences. So after they are extracted, they are sequenced using big machines. And then all of those different DNA sequences are given back to me in a file. And we have to kind of assemble them so that we know, based on that line of DNA, what microbe was there. And there's a lot of like, I'm simplifying it a lot, but it's kind of a way to see the microbial community without doing what was done before, which was isolating and waiting for the microbes to grow. And it's just a little bit more, I guess it has a little bit less bias than it used to when they were cultivated in the lab.
Yeah.
And then these sequences are analyzed using computer programs. So there's a lot of coding and R scripts and R programming. And that I think was the biggest learning curve for me in my master's degree. I think it might be for all or most microbiologists that started their career doing cultivation and like isolating and that kind of data collecting.
Yeah.
It's very clear that everything is transitioning into more programming software world.
Mm,
Uh,
mm.
yeah, and I want to give unsolicited advice on on this area of data analysis because I think it's so frustrating. Like not everyone has a computing brain, like
Yeah,
a computer
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
language. And I didn't have one in the beginning either.
Mhm.
But I think just having peers, positive influences, people that can answer your questions in a very
Yeah.
kind way,
Mm.
people that know how to teach, that is such a huge, important thing. Um, I wasn't able to learn by myself. Like I even now keep asking questions about how to do things, and I'm very grateful that I have a lot of peers that are very nice to me and that answer all my stupid questions.
That's nice. Yeah, that's very important. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also being a kind peer yourself. Um, a lot of people are very like jealous or like defensive about their code, and I am not like that at all. I think if you spent the time doing it and it can
Exactly.
help someone else, then just let it
Mm.
go.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, so that's where like a lot of effort are going into this sort of open science concept. Like it's always good if you have like resources that you can use and you can share it with others to the best of their benefits. And that actually helps ultimately for us to actually grow science together, right? So that's the whole concept of like science being more of like a teamwork rather than like in isolation, right? Which has been like sort of the traditional way you think of it. Like whenever you think about a scientist, you're like thinking of someone who is like working in isolation and not necessarily as part of a team. But a lot of the efforts that you were talking about actually goes into the concept of open science uh, and all that. So I would like to like emphasize of how the sort of like the huge spectrum of work that you are involved in, everything from like collecting the samples from the field to analyzing it in the laboratory. And as you mentioned, like actually it was a like a like a difficult like steep curve for you, but you actually are now proficient in R and trying to learn more about it. So it's just that like when you are in this science field, there's not really a like a skill that you can avoid, like everything from public speaking to sort of presenting your research. It's a whole package. You can't really focus on one thing and then just stick to that, right? So yeah, that's also about like to reinstate that how important flexibility is in terms of pursuing science. So yeah, just another question, Patricia, is like just like what's the future of it? Like where do you see this research going or
Well, I
effort?
actually want to say something about what you mentioned about public speaking because that is, yes, such a big thing in um, a graduate degree. I used to be so shy about public speaking, and I still am. It's such a scary thing to do, just to it's so vulnerable to just put your hard work out there and just like stand there and basically be judged because that's kind of what it is. But it's so rewarding to just get through it and then have people ask questions. I think that's the most rewarding part for me. Some people think that's the most scary part and the worst part, but I love answering questions about my science. I did a conference, I think it's been a year already, which is insane, but I went to Oslo. No, stop that. What's it called? Okay. I went to Ocean Sciences in New Orleans in February last year. I was still doing my master's, and it was my first time speaking in public in a session. And I was just on a stage with my huge presentation because it was huge. Um, and I was just talking to this audience that knew nothing about sea lampreys. And then out of that, when we left I guess the room, I was downstairs collecting or helping my friends collect their poster, and this person came up to me and she was like, "Oh, I was in your talk and it was so good. I work with sharks. I do this," and we just chatted about fish and just I don't know. I was also looking for advice into to get into the workforce and find my a job. So we talked about that too, and it was such a rewarding conversation that came out of me giving a very scary presentation.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think it's just eventually everyone says the same thing, but the more you do it, the less scared you get.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know,
Yeah.
or maybe you just black out and
Mhm.
just
No, absolutely. No, I've felt that like I think a huge part of any graduate program is like conferences. Like it feels like that, like you learn so much. Well, first of all, for me, it's always like a humbling experience because you sort of realize that how less you know, like the amount of work or the amount of science that goes into and you are exposed to in some of these conferences is just like sometimes it's overwhelming, but it's also humbling, right? Because you realize that you have so much to do. So yeah, it's like as a scientist, like I know you've gone through it also, and we all at some point understood the importance of how important these conferences are, and yeah, it's important for everyone actually. It's important for the students. It's also important for the faculties who are looking out for uh, like students as well. So yeah, so it's like overall it's just going back to my original statement that being a scientist, it's just that there's no one work you can say that no, that's not my work. You probably have to at some point learn to do that as well. So yeah,
yeah.
but y-
Also prepares you for life in
mm,
work.
absolutely. Yeah, and also like being open to opportunities, right? Like for example, in your case, you're like jumping into like the chances you got, right? It's not necessarily like it has to be the best fit, or some people would say, but just being open to opportunities. And I feel like that always ends up well. I feel like it. The worst that it can happen? You don't get the job, but as you said, that even interviewing it's a whole experience. I still remember the first time I interviewed for a job. Like it was a 2 hour interview. uh I ended up like my shirt was like soaking with sweat, and it was like a terrifying experience. But having said that, like after that terrifying experience, every other job interview I go into, or interview in general I go into, I'm more confident because I'm like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? So it's important to have those experiences, I feel like, for any early career looking for jobs, right? So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
I think it's important to have experience in interviewing, even if it's for an internship
yeah,
or for any experience. I think it's important that you learn how to market yourself
yeah,
and to advocate for yourself, and you have to sell yourself.
yeah,
That's the key. And it's also really important to remember that you're the person that's interviewing you is also a person. So it's
yeah.
okay if sometimes you just don't click. I've had that before where I applied for a job and the person that was interviewing me and we didn't really make like a good
Hmm.
connection, and it
Hmm.
kind of what led me to think that that was not the job for me. I said
Hmm.
maybe I am just not going to have like work chemistry with this person, so maybe I should try looking for something else. And
Yeah,
that's good as well because I think having a healthy and inclusive work environment is so important.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's like I can't we can't like I think both of us we have experiences, but I can't like sort of reinstate that enough. Like uh the people you work with, that makes so much of a difference in like in general. So it's always to get to know like what you're going into and what you can like expect. And yeah, that's a part of the job search experience. So yeah. So Patricia, like we're almost like at the end of the podcast, but I'd like to like just touch base with you again, like in terms of I just want to reinstate that the experiences that you shared today, I think that's like I'm very grateful to you because you also put your personal experiences and how you went through the process yourself. And I think the key takeaways for me from this podcast is that uh, to remain open to possibilities like your career trajectory, like the diverse experiences you have actually led to what you are today. And if and at any point you sort of said that no, I just want to do fisheries or something like that, then that you couldn't have come here. So what I'm trying to say is that you need to remain open to the interdisciplinary nature of science it is today. It's not it's because that how like science works today. Like you need a lot of different minds, you need a lot of different projects. The first time I went into CEOS and realized that like everyone from microbiologists to chemists actually work together, it was a very like I couldn't realize, okay, how does that work? It's very two different different departments. But then I got to sort of learn a lot from like people like you, like working in microbiology. I know that there are people in chemistry and biology, and then there are people like us who are like remote sensing people, right? So it's just that it's like being open to that, because I think you can learn a lot from each and every discipline. And when you're open to that and that creates new possibilities, right? And even from a job perspective, I've seen a lot of places where they actually create positions for you. Like maybe they have like maybe you're a microbiologist and then you have a remote sensing satellite mission that needs a microbiologist, right? So sometimes if you're networking enough, they will actually reach out and sort of, even if they don't have that position hiring at some point in the future, you might actually get in. So that's those are like I think key takeaways. So yeah, and I would like to thank you again for sharing your experiences. I think those are so valuable for our